A year ago, I sold my Apple Watch to go all in on the Oura Ring, but a few months ago, I bought an Apple Watch again. And in this video, I want to break down all the differences to help you decide which one is for you, or if you're like me, if you should get both. You also get to hear from my wife, who is a certified personal trainer and has also had an Oura Ring and an Apple Watch in the past. And you can hear which one she recommends and what it's like to train and use every single day. Like most tech products these days, there's not really a wrong answer. It just comes down to the trade offs you're willing to live with. All right, so let me give you a little overview of what we're going to break down in this video. First, I'll give you a little backstory as to why I ditched the Apple Watch and what brought me back to the Apple Watch, and then I'll try and give you my best recommendation based on the different types of goals out there. So, right up front, an important distinction between these two products is that one is what I would consider a passive tracker, and the other is a very active tracker. On the one hand, you essentially have a small smartphone on your wrist that can get notifications, you can run different apps on it, download music and podcasts, and do a ton of different things beyond just fitness and health tracking. There is a screen, you can interact with it, you can check things in real time, whereas the Oura Ring is designed to be unobtrusive. There's no vibrations from notifications, there's no screen that could potentially distract you, which also means that you basically always need to have the app on your phone in order to consume data and check in on anything that you're looking for. I think most people are going to be able to make their decision based on that factor alone. The general consensus out there I've seen is that if you like the Apple Watch, you're willing to put up with the aesthetic, maybe you even prefer the aesthetic, and you just kind of want as many features as possible. Whereas there are a lot of people out there that don't want it to look like they're always wearing a piece of technology or wearing a personal tracker. For me, this was a big deciding factor about a year ago because I started to build up my own analog collection of watches and I wanted to start being able to wear them more often. But I found that anytime I wore them, I started to get more and more gaps in my data because I would take my Apple Watch off and then maybe forget to charge it, forget to put it back on. One of the things, for example, was that I was trying to cut out drinking about a year ago, and I wanted to see how that would affect my sleep. But if I hadn't charged the Apple Watch or I forgot to put it on again when I was going to bed, then I just didn't get any of that data. So like I said, I've had the Oura Ring for over a year now, and I am fairly active. I go to the gym about 3 or 4 times a week. I pretty much walk every day. So I'm by no means like a fitness enthusiast, but it does mean that I am generally tracking some sort of activity almost every single day. So right off the bat, when I switched to the Oura Ring, I was really impressed with how easy it was to just get my data and actually understand what it meant. With the Apple Health app, I just feel like it's not very well designed. I never really know where to look for, so I just honestly stopped spending time in there. And I would rely on things like the activity rings on the Apple Watch, which didn't really tell the full story because it's really only talking about your calorie and move goals rather than actually your overall stress and where your health is heading. But with Aura, I started to learn that it was trying to give me a good representation of the whole day and not just what I felt at that point in time. So, because it's trying to track your physiological stress and how your body's reacting to different events, as well as anything that you manually input, which is what they call tags. So, you could put something in there for drinking, for travel, if you were sick, or any number of things. And it can use that data to help decide if that had a positive or negative impact on your health. So, if you get good at doing that, at least up front, and kind of investing the time to figure out what works and doesn't, you'll actually start to realize that when you wake up and you feel good in the moment. So if I woke up in the morning and I actually felt like I slept great, I would sometimes check Aura and see that I had like a 65 or a 70 sleep or readiness. And readiness specifically was important because if it was lower, I would almost without fail feel like I got to the afternoon or evening and start to really feel that type of score. Now, there's definitely a lot of debate around whether checking these scores can dictate how you actually feel, almost like a placebo effect. But to be fair, I think some of that's coming from people who might be checking data too often already, and they can start to use it as confirmation bias. And that's where having an Oura Ring helps kind of detach you from the data and the numbers because it's not always accessible. If you want to check your sleep score, if you want to enter something, you have to have your phone to enter it. And it's definitely not as easy to get sucked in when there's not a screen attached to what's on your hand. So the Oura Ring was working great for a while, and anytime I went to the gym, I would just take it off and then throw on my cheap Fitbit and then just track any type of strength workouts so that I wasn't wearing a ring while I was lifting. Because if you don't know, you should definitely not be lifting with any piece of jewelry on your fingers. It's incredibly dangerous. So that meant that the Oura Ring was completely out for any type of my activity tracking. Now, to clarify, Oura does track activity, but to be honest, unless it's something very basic, I don't feel like it's very accurate. So if you're just going on a walk, it'll usually track that, even runs. And my wife does a lot of dance fitness, and she says it's pretty accurate for that. But you obviously can't wear it for lifting, which means you have to enter it manually, and then you're not getting as accurate data. But I also feel like in general, the threshold for what constitutes an activity on the Oura Ring is pretty low. Even while I was filming B-roll for this video, it actually triggered as a potential walk. And you can just go in and you can dismiss this in the app, so it doesn't automatically go into your data, but it just felt like a clunky way to be tracking activity in my opinion. And the final thing that led me back to the Apple Watch was that I wanted a subtle way to wake up in the morning that didn't wake up my partner or was annoying to wake up to, which like most phone alarms are. And because the Oura Ring doesn't have a haptic motor, there was no way to get like a subtle vibration when I wanted to be woken up. And really my only options at that point was the Apple Watch. I needed something that was really helpful for tracking my heart rate zones, a built-in timer that I could reference as I was working out, and it didn't hurt that it could do a few other things that would replace my need for a phone. This was kind of an unexpected benefit for me, but because the Apple Watch can download podcasts and save music, you can pretty much just go to the gym with a watch and some headphones. I found myself being able to fully leave my phone at my apartment when I go down to the gym and just pretty much have some AirPods and the watch, and it can track my workout, it can track all my interval times, and it can play music or podcasts because it can actually save to the watch. I don't even need Wi-Fi because stuff is just set to save automatically. It's a little tedious if you want to start listening to something that's not saved, but honestly, being able to go down with a water bottle, with this already on my wrist, AirPods already in, and basically just be carrying my keys was pretty nice. Now, that specifically might not be your reason for getting the Apple Watch, but I have found that there are quite a few little quality of life features that are just nice to have that obviously the Oura Ring just couldn't compete with. Like I mentioned, using this as my alarm every morning has been amazing. I still use an app called Sleep Cycle, which allows you to set a wake up range, and you can go up to, I think, 30 or 40-minute period where it'll try to detect when you're most awake and wake you up at that point in the range that you set. So if you're generally trying to be up by 7:30, you could actually set the range from 7 to 7:30. And if you're a little bit more awake at 7:15, then that's when the alarm will actually go off. Because it's an Apple product, you can connect to HomeKit, so I can actually control my smart home devices. I'm fully on Apple Home stuff, and it is great to be able to just turn a light on or use Siri to call that out right on the wrist. Obviously, we all know Siri is horrible right now, but every now and then it's helpful to add something to the groceries list or send a quick text, and you don't actually have to use your phone or hands to do anything. And if you have a Mac, the Apple Watch can also unlock your device the moment you sit down. With my work laptop, I have to have a pretty long password, and entering that in 10, 15 times a day between when my computer goes to sleep is a little annoying, I'll be honest. And so every time I sit down, it just automatically unlocks. Again, it's a little quality of life thing. And while all of these are very convenient, I will call out that I've been really strict about any type of notifications coming into the Apple Watch. In fact, I've pretty much disabled every notification. It barely vibrates unless it's something during a workout, like I've hit a mile or whatever that kind of milestone is. But I completely locked it out from being a mini smartphone. And you do need to be really intentional with that. Otherwise, you can just get sucked in and it's another device that's distracting you. You'll also get to hear from my wife, who is a certified personal trainer, and her opinions on which one she would recommend.
Hello, Luke's YouTube channel. I'm Claire. I'm Luke's wife. I've been brought in to tell you about my Oura Ring and why I like it and when I don't like it. I'm a personal trainer. My activity looks very different from Luke's activity, and it may look very different from your activity, but I've talked about it a lot with my clients as well as other people in the gym, so I thought I would give you a mix of my takes and their takes in the general conversation around what we do and don't like and just the nuances in between. I also have had an Apple Watch in the past, but I actually have really small wrists. I'm 5'2", and even the smallest Apple Watch I find to be very clunky and frankly just annoying. And as someone who's also really into fashion, straight up inconvenient multiple times. When you're trying to plan an outfit, it just looks really silly. So the Apple Watch takes up the entire size of my wrist. Even the smallest one is incredibly blocky. So when I'm bending my wrist forward and backwards, it cuts into me, or at least I can feel it against the back of my hand. Now, I really love the functionality of an Apple Watch. It would be great for running timers, running music, texting on the go, voice texting, but because it feels so big on my wrist, I just haven't done it again. My ADHD also makes me incredibly sensitive to anything on my body, whether it's clothes, shoes, wind, it doesn't matter. So having something that feels really bulky on my wrist is just an absolute no for me because it's going to drive me crazy all day. However, with my Oura Ring, because of how much slimmer it is, it's a lot more functional. However, it does come with its trade-offs. Aura is really great at detecting your heart rate. And so for me, it doesn't matter because I'm not running long distances. It still picks up my dance fitness workouts as well as any cardio I do. In fact, it works so well that it actually picks up my anxiety. So if I'm running late to something, I actually get an activity notification for my heart rate, not because I was doing anything crazy, but because my heart rate spiked to 103. So if you're someone who struggles with being stressed and anxious, the Aura is actually a really good tool just to track how much your heart rate actually jumps throughout the day, and over time you can bring it down.
Okay, so let's do a head-to-head comparison on some of the main features you're looking for. As far as sleep goes, like I said, Aura tends to be a little more realistic about my overall day than just how I'm feeling in the moment. So you may get some low scores, but I generally feel like I trust it more because it generally represents how I feel throughout the day and not just at that point of time. Apple Watch, on the other hand, is fairly accurate. It's almost always 5, 10, sometimes even 15% higher than the Oura Ring, and that's what also makes me just feel like it's being overly positive. You do get a few other benefits with the Apple Watch, like the wake up alarm or just using any other third party apps in general. So if you don't want to get locked into a big brand like Apple or even with Aura, then you get to choose whatever app you want. I'll also just add that I definitely prefer sleeping with only the Oura Ring versus the Apple Watch. I wish the Oura Ring just had like a built in haptic motor and then I wouldn't really have to wear it. But the Apple Watch is noticeable to sleep with. It's not at all uncomfortable, but being a bigger device, you're probably going to notice some of the sensors flashing off, especially as you're winding down. It kind of does a few reads before you're actually falling asleep. And it's not anything that's ever woken me up, but it's definitely noticeable. The Oura Ring does the same thing, but I find that your finger generally blocks most of that light, so it's not as noticeable. Next, let's talk about stress and resilience. These are not really vocab terms you will find in the Apple Health ecosystem. The Apple Watch really pushes you to just move in general and try to sleep well, work out as much as possible, move throughout the day. They have stand reminders, you have different step goals you can put on there. Whereas the Oura Ring, again, is trying to look holistically at your health. So the stress and resilience side of it talks about your physiological stress. So a lot of people sometimes get this confused with just their emotional state. And sometimes there is a correlation, but it's important to just know when your body is physiologically stressed and that sometimes that is healthy or not always indicative of something really negative happening. For example, going to the gym is really stressful for your body. Doesn't mean something bad is happening, but also drinking alcohol generally will stress your body out and you won't sleep as well. So there are some correlations to that and how that affects your mental state. But when we talk about stress, that's what Aura is mostly measuring. And then your resilience is just how well your body recovers. So if you did work out a ton one night, then how well did you sleep and how are you feeling the next morning? That's the kind of stuff that Aura is measuring against all that other data. The Apple Watch tries to be more simple by just giving you the 3 rings, which are move, stand, and exercise. And so you kind of have to interpret based on how well you slept if something impacted it before. Whereas because you can put in specific tags with something like the Oura Ring, it's a lot easier to trace things over time. And because that's often shared with the community as well, if you put in like a hot bath, for example, it's like a common thing a lot of people do, then it's generally going to tell you you're going to have an increase in sleep whenever you take a hot bath. Obviously, every body is different and it's going to respond differently to these things, but it's giving you a lot more info than the Apple Watch for sure. I will say that there are some third-party apps I found for Apple Watch that pair really nicely. Specifically, there's an app called Harvey, which I actually found on Threads. So they have different exercises and insights. You can track when your most stressful times are, your most stressful days. It's a pretty affordable subscription, if I remember correctly. I tried it out for about a month or two, but because, again, I have the Oura Ring, I just decided to go back to that. If you are going with just the Apple Watch, you could definitely check out an app like Harvey, though.
Aura is really good at detecting when you're stressed, physically, mentally, physically exerted, even when you're coming down with sickness, which is something that's often really advertised, showing those major minor signs, right? And as someone who has a harder time with dialing it back than actually doing something, it's been really great for me because it tells me when I need more rest, when I need more sleep, how my recovery is actually doing versus the Apple Watch wouldn't tell me that as much. I have a pretty severe gluten allergy. I basically have all the symptoms of celiac without actually having celiac. So when I get glutened, whether it's by choice or on accident, Aura actually shows that I'm sick. The first couple of weeks I had it and I started my period, it acted like I was dying. It showed me major signs for the first couple of weeks and it really took me off guard because I'm like, I'm fine. This is just what happens. But it's really just the technology learning your body and learning your cycle. So make sure you add in those tags just to make sure it can kind of learn where you're at. What is really cool though is that my internal temperature goes through phases throughout my cycle and I can see that in detail on my Aura. I've always gotten really, really hot on my period to the point where I need to wear shorts in the winter sometimes or adjust my sleeping. And it's really cool to see that data line up with what I've been feeling on the app.
Next, we have workout tracking. Now, the answer isn't as cleanly cut for most people as it is for me in just getting an Apple Watch, but I think it really comes down to the fitness lifestyle you have. If you're someone who's going to be, I don't know, rock climbing and doing very like extreme sports, I would definitely recommend the Apple Watch. It's really built to be out there, even something like the Apple Watch Ultra if you're doing marathons and stuff like that. If you're generally just walking and doing kind of light cardio or activities that wouldn't hurt the ring or be dangerous for you to wear, like lifting, then you can get away with the Oura Ring for sure. Maybe you like to use the timer so you don't have to have like a phone around. I often use an app called Strong to plan my workouts as well, so that as soon as you finish a set, you can just trigger it on your watch and keep going. Stuff like that, then obviously you can't do anything like that with an Oura Ring.
Now, my workouts are quite varied. I do a lot of dance fitness, I do a lot of cardio, Pilates, and also strength training and HIIT. So I don't mind manually entering that every so often into my Aura. It does usually pick it up because I get a heart rate spike, but it doesn't do it for the entire duration of the workout. However, the Apple Watch was much better at actually picking up when I was doing different activities, whether the difference was between dance and Pilates and lifting. Both have a really great range of different activities they can track, but one of the big differences with activity tracking is with an Apple Watch, you have to go into the app, pick your workout, and then start it. Versus with Aura, it just manually picks it up and then logs it for you. So you can go back through at the end of the day and categorize what your activities were and change it, adjust the time, whatever. But to get an accurate tracking with Apple Watch, you have to go in first and do that. And for me, my ADHD really struggles with transitions, so I would never remember to log anything on my watch until later in the day or after I'd completed it.
Next, we have the battery, and this is a big difference. The clear winner here is the Oura Ring. You only have to charge this about once a week. I would say, depending on how often you're working out and moving around, you may have to actually charge it twice a week. What I found works really well for me, because I have both, is to take my Oura Ring off, put it on the charger whenever I head to the gym, and I'll just put my watch on at that point, and then I'll go work out. When I get back, it's almost always at 100% charged, and if I do that at least twice a week, I'm almost never running out of battery. And that way I can put it on, I can shower with it, sleep with it, wear it throughout the entire day, and there's only a 30-minute to an hour gap where it's not on, and that's where the Apple Watch has that data covered because I'm working out. Now, the Apple Watch I have is the Series 11. This is the latest Apple Watch as of now that you can get. And the battery life is, I would say for me, about 2 days. I wear it at night to sleep, and I generally wear it throughout the day. There are also days that I take it off and then I only put it on when I have a workout. But if I'm wearing it all day and at night, I generally have to find a similar window to the Oura Ring to charge, but every single day. So whether that's hopping in the shower, I'll put it on, or when I get back from the gym in the evening, I'll put it on charge so that when I go to bed a few hours later, it's always at 100%. But I've had to kind of find and plan out those times. You cannot get through more than 2 days with the Series 11. And I think for most people who will probably use more apps and interactions on it than I do, you may even have to charge it every single day. I kind of compare the Oura Ring to a Kindle and the Apple Watch to an iPad. I have to charge my iPad mini at least once or twice a week, and I charge my Kindle maybe once a month. And that's kind of the same thing relatively for the Oura Ring and Apple Watch. Next, we have the form factor. We talked a little bit about this already, but obviously the Oura Ring is smaller. It's going to be a lot more sleek and out of the way. Everyone kind of knows what an Apple Watch is, or just in general, like what a smart watch looks like. I do have some more premium bands from the Apple Watch from when I had one a few years ago. And every now and then I'll throw it on just to dress up. But honestly, nothing beats having an actual analog watch. Like even a budget analog watch is going to probably look better. A lot of that comes down to personal preference. But in general, I feel like when you're wearing the Apple Watch, it looks like you're wearing a fitness tracker. And the Oura Ring is more subtle, but I'll also call out that it is pretty big. I actually wear it as my wedding ring, so it's going on my ring finger, and you can definitely tell that I can't fully close my fingers because it pushes out on the sides. It's a bigger profile than most rings are, and you may want to take that into consideration when you're choosing your size and what finger to wear it on. The way that the Oura Ring does their ring sizing is they'll actually send a complete sizing kit, which is basically a bunch of 3D printed rings, so you could actually wear the plastic piece for a little bit and get used to it before you commit to your specific size. I will say that these test rings felt ever so slightly thicker than the actual metal ring itself. Just something to keep in mind that it's probably not going to be as clunky and as uncomfortable as that piece of plastic, because that's obviously just a very cheap piece of material. The Oura Ring itself is a pretty premium product. I didn't feel like it had quite that same roughness, given that it's metal.
Now, if you're watching this video and you're on some sort of fitness journey, whether it's weight loss or weight gain, and you're trying to figure out whether to get an Oura or an Apple Watch, I do recommend an Apple Watch for one reason and one reason only. Your body weight is going to shift, which means your hands are going to shift, whether they're going to get smaller or bigger, depending on your specific goals. And at this time, Oura does not offer a free replacement if your ring size shifts. With having small wrists, I never really found that I could find a good Apple Watch band that actually really worked for me. I tried tons of them through Apple, through Amazon, through other companies. Doesn't really matter what it was. I never really found one that I fell in love with or was really comfortable. And a lot of the times with the rubbery ones, I felt like I just got really sweaty underneath. And I've actually found a couple of small businesses that can create cuffs to go around your Oura, and they actually are very ornate, very beautiful. They can use precious gemstones, and they can make it look like any other ring stack out there, which is incredibly cool. And now, if you want to swing by my channel, it's Dance with Claire. Luke will put it below. I post about dance fitness, so you'll see some choreography, some behind the scenes takes of being a group instructor and a personal trainer as well. I hope this was helpful, and I'll let Luke continue the video.
Finally, I want to talk about the software. When you're using the Oura Ring, you are, of course, forced to have the app on your phone to get any type of data. So you can't just have the Oura Ring by itself. It is worth calling out that you have to pay a membership either monthly or yearly. I believe it's like $7 a month or $70 a year. So definitely not nothing, but something to note that you can't just buy the Oura Ring and use it by itself. That being said, I do think the Oura app is a lot more premium and easier to navigate than the Apple version. So whether you're using the Activity app on Apple or the Apple Health app, I can just never navigate to what I'm looking for. You can kind of pin different widgets that you want to continue to come back to, but it's very difficult, in my opinion, to navigate. Now, part of that's canceled out by the fact that you kind of have all the apps you need on the Apple Watch. You don't really need to use the phone. You don't have to pay a membership. You get most of the data you need right on your wrist. So you're probably rarely needing to open up the phone unless you're looking for something specific or like exporting your data or something like that. Now, realistically, you shouldn't have to spend that much time in either of these apps. Just know that since you do have to pay for the Aura app, I personally think it's worth it. They do a really good job of keeping it updated, rolling out new features, and making it feel like you actually get your money's worth. Whereas Apple is not really just focused on being a fitness tracker, they're kind of maintaining an entire ecosystem there. So the trade off is that you either get a really solid fitness app or a mediocre fitness app, but a ton of other apps along with it. So there's three potential options here. Either you're going to get an Apple Watch, you're going to get an Oura Ring, or you're going to get both. I'm going to go ahead and assume most people don't want to buy both devices. It is a luxury. It's kind of overkill for the most part, and you really probably could get away with just one or the other. So if you're someone who is not a huge tech person and just wants to be able to have something that can track their overall health and fitness, and you don't want to get distracted by another device and just have something that's reliable and discreet, you should absolutely get the Oura Ring. If you're someone who likes the idea of being able to get a lot more than just a fitness tracker, turn it into a mini iPod, use it as a phone, a personal assistant, whatever else, then the Apple Watch is your only option because you have to get a smartwatch to do a lot of those features, and you're not going to be able to do any of that with an Oura Ring. You also don't have to go buy a $400 smartwatch. It doesn't have to be an Apple Watch even. You could get a Fitbit or other third-party devices, especially if you don't have an iPhone. I specifically got an Apple Watch because it integrates with the ecosystem really well. I just didn't want to have to deal with Google or another brand that didn't integrate well because it usually meant I had to do a lot of manual entry, and that's what I was doing on the Oura Ring anyway. If you do have an iPhone and you want to save some money, you could go get the Apple Watch SE3. That is their budget smartwatch, and it can do almost anything you need. In conclusion, the perfect health tracker doesn't really exist because it's not just about health tracking. You may also want to be tracking your fitness or use it as a tool. So at the end of the day, it just comes down to your personal goals, obviously what your budget can handle, but I hope this video helped you make that decision. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.